Alright, so what we're doing today is sort of an epoxy table build. No, an epoxy table build, but it's probably gonna fail. And let me show you why. If you want to be good at anything in life, you're gonna have to fail. Your first business, your first everything, you're gonna have to fail. And this project is gonna be no different. This is just some scrap maple that I kind of had bought a couple of years ago, and it's just been sitting around the shop taking up space. And epoxy is leftover epoxy that I had from another project a couple of years ago. Epoxy's probably not even still good to use anymore, but it's been sitting around and I got some free time. So let's try to make an epoxy table out of this. I don't even know that I have enough epoxy for this table, but we'll see what happens. I'm gonna make a coffee table here. The first thing I did, this was before I pulled the camera out, but you guys can kind of imagine how to do it. I took this slab, it looks like an 1.5 inch thick slab, and I ripped it down to 49 inches in length, and then did one rip cut straight down the middle of it, and I did that with that new track saw. I did that with that track saw that I got. So I ripped this down, and the next thing we're gonna wanna do is build the mold for it. So I think our layout is gonna look something a little bit like this. We're gonna go, I was planning on going 2 feet wide, 49 inches wide. Planning on actually finishing off at 23 by 48. But we go a little bit bigger with these epoxy projects. That way we can rip some off just to make sure we're square at the end of it. So what I'm going to do first is build my mold. Just an extra sheet of melamine that I had laying around that I was going to use as a whiteboard, and well, it didn't really work as a whiteboard. So we're going to go ahead and rip this end down. It's got some screw holes in it and we want a fresh edge anyways. One more bead of caulk on the inside edges and these inside corners as well. That's just to really make sure we're waterproof, because kind of the last thing we want to do is have a leak going on. So it's a little bit extra protection, gives you a little bit more peace of mind. And if it looks like I'm sweating, it's because I am. It's 90 degrees here in Michigan. I have no AC in my shop, so it's extremely hot in here. It's about 10 degrees hotter inside the shop than it is outside of the shop. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna take a little break here and try and get some of the sweat off me. Run inside, sit in the AC, enjoy that. Maybe have a beer, and then we're gonna come back out here with some packing tape. I'm giving this stuff some time to dry now. About an hour, should be good to go. Feels pretty good. I'm in a new shirt. It's the same day. I've just sweated through 2 shirts now today, so I'm buying an AC next year. That's done. There's this old saying that anything worth doing is worth doing well. That does not apply to this. Today we are just getting rid of some scrap epoxy, some scrap wood that I have laying around. It's just been taking up space. We're gonna make mistakes here. We're gonna do some stuff wrong. If you wanna learn how to make an epoxy video, read the comments and somebody explain how to do it, or watch somebody else. But we're giving it our best shot today. Actually, we're not giving it our best shot today. We've done very well in the past. Today we're just throwing some stuff together and seeing if it works. So, got our form, what I think is done. and we're gonna toss our slabs in now and get those arranged. So we have our epoxy here. This is just some cheap brand I bought years ago. This stuff is probably 3 years old at this point. We're gonna see if it works. For our colors, what we're gonna go with is a silver black. I think the black looks the best with the maple. And assuming this even works, I think it will look coolest with the black. Alright, I think we're mixed up pretty good here. So we're gonna go ahead and pour. So there's our first pour. You can't tell, that only did about 1/4 inch, so we're gonna need several more gallons to get this job done. Maybe a little bit of an underestimate from me there. I knew it was gonna be short, but I just guess I didn't think it was gonna be that short. I don't know what I was really thinking, to be quite honest with you, but we'll order more epoxy. All right, we got our first pour done here. Looks like the table was a little bit unlevel because it's a lot darker on this side than this side, because I think it all ended up running down that way. But it does kind of make a cool design, something maybe we might want to do in the future. But one issue we did have is this dried really nice, but this part, I poured it way too thick. I poured, it's 1 3/4 or whatever thick. And I poured the whole thing, and it actually cracked right down the middle here. You can see all the way down to the tape at the bottom. It completely snapped. I think that's fine because it's still like a 1/4 inch from the top. So I think if we pour another coat on top of it, it'll actually fill that and hopefully won't see that. I'm not totally sure. But it's just kind of going along with the theme of this project, which is try and see what happens. So we'll go ahead. I'm gonna stir up the next batch and we'll get that poured. Did forget to mention too, if you're gonna be pouring multiple coats, make sure to sand in between coats. It looks like it's all scratchy right now, but when you do your next pour, it actually fills all those scratches in. You won't see them. This helps the coats adhere to each other. Alright, so we're doing another pour for the epoxy table. You can see I already scuffed this up. Mixing up what's going to be my 3rd gallon so far. I think this is actually going to take 4 gallons, maybe a little bit under. But we'll see here in just a minute where we're at after this gallon. So let's get it stirred up. Kind of been playing with different glitters throughout this process, which I think might screw me over a little bit in the end. But this one we're going to move on to this black. We'll see how this stuff works. The last one I ordered was actually glitter, not like this fine powder. I guess I just didn't read the description enough. But it actually turned out kind of nice and made me realize I want to go with just a flat black rather than like the swirly black. So we'll see how this stuff turns out. Time for what I believe to be our last pour here. I'm inside here in Michigan. The temperature is dropping, so I can't really do it out in my barn anymore. So we're gonna do it inside the basement today, and I got everything scuffed up, got our last thing of epoxy mixed up, and we're gonna go ahead and pour it. So now we get to do one of my favorite parts, which is actually demolding this. So let's go ahead and get that done. Now we got it released from the mold. It's looking pretty good. I'm pretty excited. The underside kind of gave me a hint of what it's going to look like. But obviously needs a lot of cleaning up, and the first step in that is going to be flattening this. So I don't have a CNC or anything to flatten, so what I'm going to do is just make a jig for my router. I'm sure you've seen them before. I'm going to film it. I might make a video about it or just include it in here. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to whip up one of those real quick, and then we'll get to flattening. So what I'm going to do is I found a piece of, just an old piece of MDF I had laying around. That's 48 wide, so I'm going to make my sled 48 wide. And what I did was I added the width of my router plus the thickness of this material twice. So this stuff's 1/2 inch thick, so 1 inch plus the router, which is 6 inches. So that gives us 7 inches, and then we want just a little bit of clearance, maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4. So I'm gonna go 7 1/4. Alright, so the camera was not filming for that, but what I did, you guys saw I cut these 3. I basically just ran a glue bead right across the top here, and then obviously it was on this side, not this side, but I ran a glue piece across that, put it down, clamped it to this board right here, and just pin nailed the shit out of it. So it seems pretty strong right there. I know a lot of people use pocket holes, but these pin nails, they feel pretty strong. I don't think I'm gonna have any issues with that. Alright, the next step is gonna be cutting our insert slot in here so our blade can actually go through this board. So what I did is, it's actually easier to just take this base plate off than it was to take the router bit out. I think it's kind of a pain in the ass, and I will be upgrading soon. But for now, took the base plate off, and we're gonna mark where our opening is. So I'm going to leave a few inches on each side just to add some strength, and I'm actually going to put a piece right here to add a little bit more strength right there so it doesn't try to flex in too much. But we'll go ahead, we got that marked out. I think I'm going to attach these 2 pieces real quick and then cut this out. And now we got to figure out how to do this. I was going to use my jigsaw, and probably still can, but I probably should have left these off so I could fit my jigsaw in there. Now I'm going to start my jigsaw like right here and hand cut this little back part, but it'll be no big deal. Yes, I have a $1,000 Festool track saw, but I do not have a good jigsaw. Priorities maybe aren't the best, but that being said, we're gonna use it. I marked my corners here of where my hole is, and I'm just gonna line this up and just actually run my saw through and cut that chunk out, and then I'll just use a little oscillator on each end to cut it. There's 100 ways you guys could do this. I know a lot of people will run like a drill bit through here and then just run their jigsaw straight down this line and cut it out. I'm going to use my track saw. So that hole's been cut out. I think what we got to do next is get our table over here and set some rails up on each side for this thing to sit across. I got my slab laying in here, and to keep it from moving side to side, I just took some of these chunks of melamine and just pin nailed them, or brad nailed them to my actual workbench. Some of you guys don't want to do that. That's on you. The way I see a workbench is the workbench. It's made to get dirty, and every once in a while I'll go back over it and I'll sand it down and clean it up. Not going anywhere here. On each side, what I did is kind of took my measurement of how much clearance I have underneath that sled down to the wood, and I got about a half inch to an inch of play down there. And so on each side I took a 2-inch runner. This was a 2x4 that I just ripped down to 2 inches height, and I clamped those down on each side and made sure there was no cupping or anything in those, so they are flat. And so now what I'm able to do is ride this up and down this way, and I'm always going to be 2 inches off the bottom, and now I can slide my router this way. I think some people will clamp these down. I'm going to try to not clamp this thing down and see if I can just run it like this. If it ends up being an issue, then we'll clamp it down. This is the router bit I'm using. I think this is the type that most people use. I know mine's a little cheaper, and honestly don't even know where I got it from. But we're going to give it a shot, see if it works. If not, this is going to get delayed and we'll have to order a new bit for this. But for now, we'll see if it works. And other than that, I think we're ready to go. You will always go in one direction, this way across, and I'm not going to go back that way because you're end up getting tear out going backwards. So we're into a pretty good amount of issues flattening this. The first issue being the cheap kind of shitty router I had kept adjusting its height. The vibration was changing the height on the router, so my bit kept dipping and diving down in, so I just wasn't getting anywhere near an even cut. So I took my actual trim router out instead, and that seemed to hold up a lot better and do flatter cuts. But one issue I had with, if you guys saw, I was just sliding it up and down. I wasn't clamping it or nothing, I was just moving it around as I was going. Well, one of the ends fell off the little piece of wood I had on the edge, so the whole router dipped into that. So I actually did 2 full passes across this. It took a few hours to do that. So I didn't really film much of it because I was kind of annoyed with what was going on, trying to figure out how I was going to fix it. And so basically I get this whole thing done except for just this little section right here, and pretty similar thing happens again. The router, I have this much left to clear off, and the router dips in right there. So I don't want this thing to get super thin. So what I did is I just took some 2-part epoxy and just filled that hole in there. Hopefully it'll look nice. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to turn out. And then another thing that we had happen right here is, you guys remember it cracked down in the middle right here. Well, I filled that crack in, but I took so much off that I'm back down to where that crack was. So the crack runs right through, and I'm also in the middle of like a couple layers right here of 2 different pores, so you can kind of see the 2 different layers. I'm not sure how that's gonna turn out. As you guys know, when you run that router up and across, it leaves all those lines going across. So I took my belt sander and 80 grit and just kind of ran this whole thing through and got it pretty flat and cleared off. So I'm gonna take the belt sander again and step to a 120 grit. Try and get some of these lines out of here. The 120 was on the belt sander, and I'm actually going to do 120 again on my orbital sander. So we are sanded down to 220. I looked it over for a while, just looking for any scratches and blemishes I could take out, and I feel pretty confident I got all of those out at this point. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to cut my edges. So I'm going to start down here, rip a little bit off this end, measure it all the way across to like 48, and then rip that off that end. And then we'll be able to get square from there to get these two sides done. We are cut to shape, cut to size. The next thing I'm going to do is put a 45-degree chamfer around the whole thing just to give it a little bit of an edge profile. Now that we got that done, what we're going to do is just hand sand it a little bit on these edges and try and get them smoothed down. Now we're all sanded down, cleaned up. I think I'm going to wipe this down one more time with a little wet rag and try and get the rest of this dust off of it. And then we are ready to go for our seal. Alright, so we're doing something a little bit special here. We're going to use Rubio Monocoat for the seal. I've never used this stuff before. Pretty excited to actually use it. And I know we were kind of going cheap with this project. I felt like it was a good opportunity for me to test this stuff out and see how well it actually works for myself. Finally, on the last part of this build here, the legs just came in the mail. The table's been done for about a week now, sitting around, and we're gonna go ahead and get this thing unboxed and get the legs attached to it. I think I was saying this was gonna be a coffee table. It's actually not gonna be a coffee table. What I decided to do is just keep it for myself and use it as a new desk. Some of the reasons behind that decision: one issue you guys will see here in just a sec is it came out pretty uneven, pretty unlevel. So I actually had to shave a lot off of this to get this even flat on the top side. So if I get it flat on the underneath side, it's actually gonna end up being pretty darn thin. And so I kind of decided to keep this for myself. I don't really care. The bottom looks like this. It's got epoxy on the bottom. I think I'll put a little bit of seal right there, but so it's kind of sealed. It's probably not gonna warp or anything, but by the time I get this all finished off and flattened out on the bottom too, it's gonna be pretty thin, and I really just didn't want to lose any thickness that I had in this. And also the swirls in the epoxy, I didn't like how that turned out either. So that was kind of another reason that led me to wanting to just keep this for myself. Alright, I didn't film very much of the building of the legs. Each leg comes with their own instructions, so I wasn't really going to explain that much to you. But once you get the legs together, obviously you just take your base plate and you try and center it underneath the desk as much as you can. Alright, here we are. We got the desk finished up and all put together. Our legs are in place. Sorry, we got a little bit of a mess going on in here, but just trying to organize. So look at that. We're all set. We're built. She is installed and assembled. So, and one of the cool features on this thing it actually has a lowering and raising legs. So I can go like this, and the whole system itself, and the whole system will raise off the ground, so I can switch to a standing desk if I want to. So pretty cool. Not sure how often I'll actually use it, but I just thought it would be a cool feature to have, and I didn't mind the legs on it. So we got some cable management to do down here, and a little bit more putting together and getting everything set up. So other than that, we're all done. Alright, so here's kind of the final result of it. I got my desk all set up. Cable management was alright on this. That power cord's kind of got to be hanging there because this thing raises and lowers, and I'm sure there's probably a better way I could get that cord to run and be able to raise and lower this and it'd be a little bit more hidden. Underneath it looks like a pretty chaotic situation. Because I got my outlet box strapped up there and a couple quarter wraps holding it up top, but I don't know, I feel like it looks kind of good. It's fairly hidden. You can see I also ran a bunch of LED lights underneath of it. You can see how that looks. It's kind of nice playing video games at it or whatnot. Pretty cool to sit by with the LEDs. I like it. It turned out pretty nice. I'm very happy with it. Everybody I've shown seems to really like it, so pretty happy with how it turns out. I think I'm going to get some professional pictures taken of it and not have it right next to my bed. But yeah, we'll get it posted and just kind of offer. I'm not going to sell this specific desk, but I'm going to let people in my area know that, hey, this is a service that I offer. And I'll let you guys know if I get any sales from that. We'll see how it goes. We'll see where this journey with YouTube takes me. But yeah, thanks again for sticking around, and hope to see you guys again. If you guys did stick around to the end, shoot me a little comment. Let's use the Matt and Shane's secret podcast code. Comment drenched if you guys stuck around to the end. So I want to see if anybody does. So thank you guys for joining me on this journey, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.